This one starts small, with a name and a street most people never knew. That morning, this file looked like nothing more than another ordinary case. Bucks Row, Whitechapel, the 31st of August, 1888. A quiet street, a routine patrol, just another ordinary morning. No one there that morning could have known what this case would become in the weeks ahead. Bucks Row was no hidden alley. It was an ordinary working street. Homes lined one side of the street, with people sleeping only yards from the pavement outside. Partway along, a stable gateway opened into the darkness behind the terrace. Gas lamps stood far apart, leaving long stretches of the street in shadow. And roughly every half hour, a constable passed along this same route. Nearby, on Winthrop Street, men in a knacker's yard were working through the night. Whitechapel Road was minutes away, brighter, busier, and still far from empty. People were close. Police passed regularly. Still, none of it was enough. In the last hours before sunrise, Whitechapel belonged to those still out on its streets. Carmen and market workers were already moving through the darkness, making their way to work. Across Spitalfields, lodging houses turned away anyone who still couldn't afford a bed. Without a bed, the street meant walking, waiting, and getting through the night. Even the gas lamps offered little comfort, their light fading within yards. This was the world Mary Ann Nichols had known for nearly a year. Lodging houses, dim streets, and nowhere secure to sleep. She was born Mary Ann Walker in London in the summer of 1845. At 18, she married William Nichols, a printer's machinist at St. Bride's Church. Over the years that followed, Mary and William had 5 children, building a family life together. The marriage endured for years, but by 1880, it was starting to come apart. Why it failed is disputed. Her father blamed William. He blamed Mary's drinking. William supported her for a time, but by 1882, the payments had stopped. Years followed between workhouses and lodging houses, with moments of stability. That spring, she found domestic work in Wandsworth, but the position lasted only a few weeks. By late August, she was back in Spitalfields, living at 18 Thrall Street. There, Emily Holland later remembered Mary as clean and mostly keeping to herself. Shortly after midnight, later reports place her leaving a public house near Thrall Street. After 1, she returned to Thrall Street, still short of 4p. She asked them to keep her bed. She'd soon earn the money. She had a new bonnet. Around 2:30, Emily Holland met her near Whitechapel Road and Osborne Street. Nichols was clearly drunk, swaying against the wall of a shop as she spoke with Holland. As they stood there, a church clock marked the half hour. 2:30. Nichols told Holland she'd earned her bed money 3 times and spent it each time. Holland offered to help her anyway, saying she could still find Mary a bed for the rest of the night. But Nichols refused the offer. She said she could still earn the money she needed for a bed herself. They talked for several more minutes. Then Nichols walked east along Whitechapel Road. Holland stayed behind and watched her disappear. It was the last confirmed sighting of Mary Ann Nichols alive. From that moment on, the surviving record simply loses track of her altogether. No confirmed route, no further witness, not another word from Mary. Before dawn, a carman named Charles Cross was making his usual walk to work. He'd left home in Bethnal Green around 3:30, heading for work near Broad Street. As he entered Bucks Row, something lying near the stable gateway across the street caught his eye. In the poor light, he still couldn't tell what he was looking at, so he crossed over for a closer look. It was a woman. He touched her hand. It was cold. Then another carman came along on his way to work. It was Robert Paul. The 2 men were strangers, but together they knelt beside the woman. Paul thought he felt signs of life. Cross wasn't so sure. No constable was anywhere in sight, and both men were already late for work. After a few words, they set off together to find one. At the inquest, he used Charles Cross. Later records call him Charles Lechmere. A little farther on at Baker's Row, they spotted a constable, Jonas Misen. Cross later said he'd told Misen the woman back there looked either dead or drunk. He said Paul added one thing of his own. He thought she was dead. But Misen remembered it differently. He said Cross told him another constable was there. Cross denied that. He said he'd seen no policeman and never claimed there was one. It matters. Either Misen misheard or they remembered it differently. And the records that survive still don't tell us for certain which of those two versions was right. While Cross and Paul headed for Baker's Row, another constable was already nearby. Neil had passed this spot minutes earlier. He'd seen nothing, heard nothing. By the time his beat brought him back again, Cross and Paul had already left the street. Then the lantern found her first, before Neil fully understood what was there in front of him. He knelt beside her. A wound at her throat confirmed the worst. Neil searched the street and saw no one nearby, a detail he later confirmed. He signaled to Constable John Thane nearby, then sent him straight off to fetch a doctor. Put the pieces together, and a much narrower window of time begins to take shape. Neil had passed through Buck's Row only minutes earlier, with nothing at all to report. Minutes later, how many is unclear, Cross found Nichols, and Paul joined him. Cross and Paul left to find a constable. Neil returned. No stopwatches, no synchronized clocks, only estimates. Those cold, half-awake minutes could feel longer or shorter than they were. What we can say is simpler. The window in which this happened was short. Short enough that whoever was responsible may not have gone far. Buck's Row offered several ways out, side passages, and the open end toward Whitechapel Road. No one could say which, if any, was used. Just feet from where Nichols lay, Emma Green slept inside with her children. Weeks later, at the inquest, she was asked, had she heard anything unusual? No. Buck's Row could be noisy, but that night, nothing seemed unusual. Nearby, men working through the night on Winthrop Street would later say much the same. But none of that necessarily means Buck's Row itself was truly silent that night. It may simply mean that no one nearby recognized what they heard as anything unusual, if they heard anything clearly enough in the first place to realize that something nearby was wrong. By 4, Dr. Reese Ralph Llewellyn had arrived from his surgery nearby. His examination was brief. Within moments, he had confirmed that Nichols was dead. From the warmth still remaining, he believed death had come only a short while before. But in 1888, no instrument could tell him the exact time of death. He had only what he could feel, his experience, in the light of a lantern. The seriousness of the case quickly drew the local police into a full, formal investigation. But several weeks would pass before anyone began connecting Nichols with what came next. Nichols is remembered as the first RIPPER victim, but that wasn't how it looked then. The Whitechapel murder file already contained 2 other names before Nichols was added. Emma Smith, attacked in April, later died from her injuries. Then came Martha Tabram, killed in August in a nearby stairwell. Both cases remained open, and no one could say for certain whether either was connected to Nichols. The group we now call the Canonical Five was not defined until years later. Even the name Jack the Ripper had not yet entered the story people were beginning to follow. That morning at Buck's Row, no one there knew they were witnessing only the beginning. So what, after all of this, actually stands on solid ground? Nichols was alive at 2:30. Soon after, Cross, Paul, and Neil arrived. We can reasonably infer the window was brief and that visibility that night was extremely poor. What we cannot know is where she went, whom she met, or exactly what happened. Beyond those few facts, the picture quickly begins to disappear into uncertainty. That gap is not a failure. It is simply where the evidence ends. And what remains is the shape of what history managed to preserve. Morning came to Bucks Row just as it did to every other street across Whitechapel that day. Carts moved, shutters opened, and the gateway became just a gateway again. We have the men's testimony, Neil's patrol account, and Llewellyn's careful estimate. What we don't have is the missing hour between 2:30 and that gateway. Before all that, Nichols had been a wife and a mother to 5 children. On her final night, she told a friend she'd somehow earn enough for her lodging herself. Remember her name? Mary Ann Nichols. That file goes back into the archive, still unresolved and still waiting for answers. For now, it stays here. That is where this case ends tonight. But Bucks Row would not be the last quiet street Whitechapel would remember. Another file was already waiting nearby, quietly holding its place in the archive. Whitechapel was not finished yet, and neither, it seemed, was this story.